This video is sponsored by Aura. Have you or someone else you know ever had your identity stolen, been a victim of fraud, or been hacked, scammed, or doxxed? How does that make you feel that so much information is available for anyone to buy? One of my close friends is actually a victim of identity theft, and let me tell you, not only is it a massive headache, but it's quite unnerving knowing that someone has access to so much information about who you are and can possibly be selling it out there. Data brokers make billions selling personal information without consent, and there isn't much anybody is doing about it. If you take a look at this report, how personal it can get, down to the possible relatives and associates. With Aura, you can protect yourself and your privacy by identifying data brokers selling your information. They do the hard stuff for you, automatically removing your info from these sites and keeping it off. They also offer a bunch of different features, such as real-time fraud alerts for credit and banking, a secure VPN, and you get 24/7 monitoring to help keep your identity secure. Aura does all of this, and I don't have to download several different apps just because a company couldn't keep my data secure. If you're interested, you can try Aura for free for 14 days at aura.com/sagesring. In those 2 weeks, Aura will get to work scrubbing your personal information off of these data broker sites. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable. And you shouldn't either.
Come at the king, you best not miss.
The Wire is not a drama about individuals rising above institutions to triumph and achieve redemption and catharsis. It is a drama where those institutions thwart the ambitions and aspirations of those they perpetually exist to serve. From Shaemus and Sweeney in The Wire's narrative and metanarrative. The Wire is a tragedy of systems and institutions rather than of individuals. The first season of The Wire introduces in both story and direction the grittiness of Baltimore and the gang. We don't get neatly manicured set pieces, the streets are not clean, people's clothes are not perfectly tailored. It is raw and unfiltered. There's trash littered throughout the streets, the cars are beaten down, so many of the extras are ragged and overrun. And it makes sense, given that we are in some of the poorest, most dangerous, drug-stricken neighborhoods in Baltimore. Both the police and the drug dealers are a shady, exploitative, and dangerous bunch. McNulty and Bunk are bar-hopping serial cheaters, while on the other hand, Avon, Stringer, and the Barksdale crew are the top dealers, taking advantage of the conditions of the black underclass, taking advantage of their own people. Oftentimes we search for morality in media. We search for heroes, good people to latch onto, bad people to root against. In The Wire, a series that contains everything but the black and white, Omar, the shotgun-wielding bandit, is one of the closest characters we get to someone we can root for. He doesn't represent any institution, instead a man with a shotgun and a code that only harms those who deserve it. Omar is like a fabled mythical being, as creator David Simon always likens his show to a Greek myth. In this Baltimore, this world of institutions, nobody has a code. No one has morals or rules that they adhere to. Not anymore, at least. Omar's distance to these factions by being beholden to something is one of the reasons why Omar is such a beloved character.
A man got to have a code.
That code that Omar follows is the first thing that stands out. Creator David Simon writes that Omar is beholden to no institution other than himself, and therefore he is not, in the logic of The Wire, debased. He therefore does not speak the debased language of those who are subject to the caprices and indifferences of the institutions they serve. We see throughout the series, Omar doesn't curse, and most of all, he is adamant, he even says it in the court of law, that no citizens get hurt. He has never put his gun on anybody that was not in the game. No mistakes, no bystanders, no taxpayers, he says. Omar will not harm anybody who is not in the game. Omar is introduced in The Wire sympathetically. He's a man who steals from those who are stealing from the community, almost like a Robin Hood of sorts, which automatically garners him some admiration. The Wire highlights predatory systems, and we see in the first season how predatory the drug game is. Kelsey Topola writes on the mythology of the Western that the drug trade enslaves victims through addiction, and subsequently those addicts support the drug trade through the money they supply. Omar, by robbing high-level dealers and crews, takes semi-control of the drugs in the area, and he sells them for a lot cheaper, undercutting the dealers and even at times giving them out for free. He recognizes that these are addicts at the end of the day, and getting outpriced by their dealers could quite literally cost them their lives. By doing this, he is ensuring that these people don't end up making life-altering deals with the drug-dealing crews in order to get their fix. Topola writes, "In the world where the game ruthlessly devours the citizens of Baltimore, Omar's work robbing and even killing those who exploit poverty, addiction, and immense vulnerability is just, good, and effective in helping the citizens of the Western live their lives." That's not to say that Omar isn't doing this for himself, because he absolutely is. His philosophy is that money has no owners, only spenders. And at the end of the day, he is doing this to make a living, using violence to profit off the drug game. But the game is the game. But when he loses his boyfriend Brandon early on in this season, that admiration turns into sympathy, thus granting him even more favor from the audience. We learn here exactly how brutal the game is, and we also discover what kind of man Omar is. Despite the game's indifference and brutality, Omar still tries to distance himself from its parasitic clutches. He is radical in that sense. Omar isn't independent in the streets, and he still tries to love. He still sees beauty, he still remains moral, despite the game being everything but those things. To be clear, his morality is one thing, but his morals are very rigid and clear. To quote Fagan in his section of The Wire and Philosophy, he says that in his own way, Omar is deeply moral. It's the game itself that is amoral. Even after having lost Brandon in such a brutal fashion, in a way that surpasses the limits of the game, Omar's retaliation was also within the boundaries created by the Barksdale crew. He never stepped outside of himself to avenge his lover. Topola adds that in The Wire, nearly everyone is corruptible, and even though Omar's code is not traditionally moral, it does promote the use of violence and criminal activity. It does situate him as part of the moral center of the series. Omar is rare in The Wire because he is almost incorruptible, and it's fascinating that he is. Omar is a product of the drug game. It's clearly all he knows. As we see him, he stands only with Butchie as his mentor and his grandmother who raised him. He has no other family aside from his brother, No Heart Anthony, who we only hear about in name. With his own eyes, he has had to build and create this code for himself based on what he's seen and what he's lived through. For whatever reason, Omar's eyes can allow him to discern how many forces are weighing down against them in the underbelly of Baltimore, which is likely the reason why he doesn't belong to any team, any institution. An independent force because he knows how the game works. You have the shotgun, I have the briefcase. He is too intelligent to get roped into being a hopper or a soldier, and he doesn't have the heart to be a dealer, trampling over real people's lives and what they got going on, simply to make more money or to chase power. And he can't leave the game because that's all he's ever known. Omar's Achilles heel, though, is that very heart and that very code. The same reason he kept going back against the Barksdales, against Marlowe, and against whoever, because his principle, his code, is his religion. It's not that vengeance fuels him, but that his code requires him to spin back for those that have wronged him and his loved ones. His loyalty asks that of him. For Omar, that's what being a man is.
Omar don't scare.
One of the focal points of Omar's character is that he is a gay man entrenched in a world of homophobia. And the first thing that has to be pointed out is that Omar is unashamed of this. Whether it's Brandon or Ronaldo or whoever, Omar flaunts his relationships. He is unflinching in that regard. It's dangerous for him to be a gay man in the game. In that first season, after Omar robs the Barksdale package, they proceed to call him every single slur under the sun. And their brutal retaliation sends a message to Omar, how not only is getting robbed a crime here, but being robbed by a gay man for these men is like a notch on their masculinity. They believe it makes them lesser than, so killing and torturing Brandon, being overly violent, is a response to that. Not only do they denigrate him as less than a man, but they also try to emasculate him. Brandon, just like Omar, because they are gay, are seen as lesser than, sometimes even less than human, in the eyes of the patriarchal masculine performance. And so, getting robbed by a gay man infuriates the Barksdale leader even more. Almost like saying, how can somebody lesser than punk me off and act like he is a man? Brandon being killed was one thing. Omar notes that it was part of the game. But being tortured and being put on display for everyone to see, it signals a, quote, violent rage often exhibited in acts of violent homophobia. From Shirin Deylami's section on masculinism, mourning, and violence in The Wire. In Queer Theory and Gender Play by Jason P. Vest, they write that Omar, along with his status as a gay man who openly, defiantly, and successfully challenges Avon's primacy, so undermines this position that Avon feels himself financially, strategically, and symbolically emasculated by his gay nemesis. Omar's bravery and ferocity should always be duly noted, as that is the crux of his character. He does not become who he is without the trials he's been through. We don't need to know what Omar has faced for him to be secure and unwavering in not only his sexuality but his masculinity, because he wears it in every single scene, and that's a part of the reason as to why people love Omar. He speaks poetically, he loves without interruption, and he is a man unaffected by these outside forces. If anything, he is even more than a man than anyone else because of his multifaceted nature, because he has a code. Omar has motion. In the realm of hegemonic masculinity, in the realm of the streets, Omar appears to be the alpha. He is the reaper who sweeps the street with his do-rag, his duster, bulletproof vest, and his shotgun. And people scatter at the sound of his name. Omar coming. He is the most prototypical man in that sense. He is calculated and cunning and strong, and he is intimidating. However, what sets Omar apart in his case for masculinity is that he can be vulnerable and kind. A man who cares so much for his lovers and his friends. A man who can recognize when he's made the wrong play. A man who can weep for those he has failed and those he has wronged and even created. Omar can be gentle but also intimidating and strong, and he chooses accordingly. Masculinity at the end of the day is an expression of gender. It is a performance. Omar being a gay man does not demasculinize him. In fact, when we compare him to a lot of the other men in this series, he has opened himself up to passion, to love, and to be loved, in ways many of the heterosexual men of this series have not, and cannot, because their performance of masculinity does not include tenderness. And that bravery, that willingness to be vulnerable, makes him that much more of a man, to me. There is a sadness that travels Omar's character, grief that follows him. The Politics of HBO's The Wire writes that Omar's grief is immediately transformed into vengeance against those who have exposed his vulnerability being his loved ones. We often hear about how men do not have the spaces to display emotion and grief, ways to properly process this sadness. This is the case for Omar. Anger is often the only acceptable emotion for men, and when pushed, violence only follows. For Omar, it's no different. Violence is the only way he will be understood. It's how the game understands things. With violence, the Barksdales will know that they have trespassed, that they've made a mockery of the game and of his emotions, and he gets stuck throughout the series in a cycle of vengeance, grief, and loss. That is the price that he pays being so heavily entrenched in the game. Bunk says that Omar is a predator of the game. He is a parasite that leeches off the already existing problem. His presence has children glorifying him and getting in line to try and be him. His presence, his actions have contributed to creating the monsters of the future. Quote, despite the fact that Omar is cast as the anti-hero of The Wire, who challenges the power of the drug dealers in Baltimore, in his vengeance he reifies many of the norms that make the game, Deylami notes. Now to pin that all on an individual goes against the very ethos of the show, because Omar is a symptom. He is a product of the game. And that's why this series is so good and why this character is so fascinating. It is all a dilemma. To love this character is to recognize that dilemma. Omar stands as both perpetrator and victim all the same. An absolute product and victim of the game from his birth. And Omar, despite being berated by Bunk, he listens to his elders. And he sheds a tear, followed by a spit of disgust. Omar knows that Bunk is right to a degree. And that's why we love Omar. Because he is sensible, reasonable. His moral code is shown on display here, also when he cries for Tasha, for Brandon. He may be a mythical figure in this world, but he is still just a man. And he is never preachy or conceited. He knows what he's done. He never claims to be this good man. While The Wire, for all intents and purposes, is a gritty, realistic, and quite pessimistic story, how individuals cannot even try to topple gods, that even an attempt will cost not only themselves, but sometimes even their loved ones or their careers in their pursuits, is not a particularly optimistic one. Omar, McNulty, Daniels, Bunny Colvin, and some others. They represent that while humanity might be sinking, there are still some admirable people in the world, some decent folk. In Omar's case, there are still people who stick their necks out for each other. Omar is loved because, despite the futility of rebellion, as Alan Spinewall notes, day in and day out, he at least chooses some form of humanity, at least a little bit. But as the seasons pass and the game gets more fierce, Omar alongside it, he begins to understand that Baltimore is slowly becoming no country for old men. That it is no longer for people who belong to the past like himself. Like Slim Charles says, the thing about the old days is, they're the old days. When Marlowe starts to wear the crown, that becomes especially evident. Omar is beholden to that code, and because he's such an anomaly in that sense, the world that has been built allows him to be the sole mythical-like figure. Although he is a free-flowing, creative, independent force in that world, he is still tethered down to something. But when Omar returns to Baltimore in the final season to avenge Butchie's unjust torture and murder, he comes back seeing red. The people of the street who helped him in the early seasons, he no longer has their ear. He no longer has their eyes. And so when he no longer adheres to being cunning and smart, when he resorts to brute force, that's when he loses his mythical quality. When he kills Savino, but has no real ties to Marlowe or what happened to Butchie, that's effectively when Omar Little signed his own death warrant. It's when Icarus flew too close to the sun. Omar gained mortality by killing Savino rather brutally, which in a way goes against his personal morality and code, allowing for someone like Kennard to almost innocuously take him out. Omar didn't get a grand send-off like Stringer or even Bodhi. He didn't get to die on his sword. His death was like a punch to the gut. In a world that has forced Omar to become this person, in a world of institutions that have repeatedly neglected the Undercity, for someone like Omar to emerge with even a modicum of kindness and benevolence and vulnerability is a testament in itself that it is a path worth choosing. Though he might be a footnote in the newspaper and forgotten down in the morgue, his legacy, his name, still carries weight. Marcia Kinder writes that The Wire shifts the focus from a fascinating individual criminal to a broader analysis of the culture that creates and destroys him. Galen Wilson says that The Spectator is meant to mourn the oppressiveness of Baltimore's social totality when Omar is shot, specifically the impossibility of individuals to resist the system, rather than feel a personal sadness at the loss of Omar as an individual character. But we the spectators, we can't help but feel that sadness, can't we? For the man who dared to be different, he dared to be better than the system, and for a time he was. We mourn Omar, because he shows that having a code that's standing for something is better than the nihilistic or apathetic acceptance that the system will win, that the gods will win. The culture that has created Omar is the same culture that kills him and forgets about him. He is swept under the rug and left to be exactly what he was, a fable. Omar dying at the hands of Kennard that he quote-unquote created is the tragedy of Omar and the tragedy that the series preaches throughout its 5 seasons. Even for as fabled and as mythically protected as Omar was, he was still a man, pitted against forces beyond him, and in this life you cannot win against the system. These are gods, as David Simon wrote, and the gods will not save you. That is the universal truth of The Wire.
It's on the game though, right?